Hey, welcome back to the FwooshCast. I'm your host, Tony, also known on the boards as Hagope. I'm here as usual with Nick, VB, on the boards. Hello, Nick.
Good morning.
Today we have a very special edition of the FwooshCast. We have the team behind Articulated Icons. I'm very excited to talk to these guys. They're all out in California, so thank you very much for joining us so early on your time. And I know that everybody out there in Fwooshland has been dying for more and more information on articulated icons, and hopefully a lot of questions will be answered. Maybe we'll get some scoops today. I don't know. Let me start off by introducing, you know him on the boards as Industrial, Indy for short. Some people call him Industrial. I don't know. That's what I've heard. It's Adam. Adam, welcome. Thank you.
Howdy.
You seem to be on the boards now. I just want to. I'll take a second to say, even though I host the official podcast of the Fwoosh, I don't really know much more about articulated icons than the general Fwoosh population. I'm not, I'm not in the inner circle there for the that stuff. So. Some of these questions are not necessarily rhetorical. But Adam, you seem to be for lack of a better word, the lead voice on articulated icons. So can you tell us, what do you do on articulated icons?
Well, I guess the to address the elephant in the room is that the AI design team are all Fwooshers as well as Gentle Giant Studios employees. So there's a lot of crossover between both Fwoosh and Gentle Giant. Fwoosh subcontracted Gentle Giant to do the prototyping work for articulated icons. So I am Director Creative Services at Gentle Giant Studios. So basically we do prototyping work for Hasbro, Mattel, Funko, Diamond, DC, you name it. Everybody out there, we make toy prototypes. So that's what I'm doing on articulated icons. I am the main point of contact. I am the art director / creative director. And both Rene and Scott are two of the guys that are working on this line. And the three of us together, it's kind of our baby that we created as three men.
Three men and the baby. Scott, let's have you join in. You will know him on the boards as Carl. Maybe we'll ask Carl. Yeah, maybe we'll ask you about the origin of your screen name in a bit. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do on articulated icons.
Primarily, I'm the one in charge of the paint. It's been a few months now we've been working on it, and the last few weeks it's all just been me in charge of the paint masters and prototyping aspect of it.
So after we saw the test shots and then all the people were dying for more pictures, we were waiting on you, right? You were just sitting at home with your little brush with the detailed and each hair and all the shading.
It is. It's all Scott's fault.
I was working on them at the studio out in Burbank, California. Working on getting all the prototypes and paint and everything taken care of there.
Cool. And Rene, you still there?
Yes.
Great.
Yep.
Welcome again. Thanks for joining us. Your screen name is easy. It's Rene. Tell us what are you working on in articulated icons?
Well, I was in charge of downloading all the parts from Turbo Squid, making sure they all did what they were supposed to do.
No one's gonna get that reference except for three people. But I guess the other three people.
Nice. I was the sculptor. I sculpted all that stuff. I made it as good or as crappy as you think it is.
Sweet. So
are you saying the deep V that was originally on the Ninja is all your fault?
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Yeah, but I mean, it was kind of a team effort.
Well, yeah, I mean that was done in tribute to Adam straight up to his normal everyday look.
Right.
Right.
I was
DP.
told to make the ninja Adam.
If it was gonna really be a tribute to me, then the V would go just
Pants
like
would
it would have
make
been
the
just
moves,
above
right?
the navel.
Right, with a little hair and gold
That'd
chains.
be- I don't know if you remember it, but it was just above the navel.
But then you just jumped back into Turbo Squid, and cinched it up. A
Yeah,
bit,
it took
right?
me a while to find the right collar.
All right. So let's, for those who have been living under a rock and may not have heard about articulated icons, let's just rewind a sec and say that articulated icons, the feudal series, is is a 6-inch scale or 1/12 scale, whatever you like to say it, action figure line that is going to be crowdfunded and produced by thefwoosh.com. It is, as you might imagine, ninjas and other sort of medieval-ish Japanese warrior-type characters. They are super articulated. There are swappable parts. There are 10 gazillion accessories and sort of display bases and all kinds of stuff. It's a pretty vast undertaking, but with this team seems to have it well in hand. Let me start by asking how this even started. I don't know, Nick, Adam, who wants to take this, but what is the origins of this?
I think I can touch on this by being unbelievably just narcissistic and telling you about the articulated icons design team and where we came from.
Yeah, please.
So Scott, Rene, and myself, all have been at Gentle Giant 9 years in October. Wow. Before that, I was at Soda Toys, and so were these other two guys. So we've been making toys for a really, really, really long time now. And basically, every year, the Fwoosh guys, which is, myself, RoboKilla, VB, Pablo Lobo, we've been talking about making toys, and Ninja has been a constant thing for so many years now that we've just finally had the means to kind of put it together. And the idea of subcontracting Gentle Giant to do the prototyping work is something that I was always nervous about, but I talked to the powers that be there, and everyone seemed cool with it, so we went forward with it and treated the Fwoosh as any other client, just like Hasbro, Mattel, Diamond, everyone else. So basically, the Ninja was sculpted by Rene in his spare time over the past couple of years. I think it was San Diego Comic-Con 2013 that we showed the digital sculpt of the Ninja to Robo, Pabs, and VB in my hotel room. Wow. So it was on my iPad or something. But it was San Diego Comic-Con of 2013 that was the first pass of the digital sculpt. So it's been in development for a very, very long time. Gentle Giant, we got involved for the prototyping aspect much more recently. That was within the past couple months that we finally decided that the Ninja was ready to come to life. And I can't wait to show it all off.
Now, recently on the Instagram, it looked like you had a date for the kickoff of the Kickstarter.
Only if you can read Japanese, though.
Should we?
Or the person who immediately posted right after who said that.
Yeah.
Can we spoil it? Can we say?
Yeah,
Is it
do it.
official?
It's announced tomorrow anyway. So, yeah.
All right. Well, this won't even go up till tomorrow. So perfect. So it's September 9th, right?
9/9.
9/9, which is 9 is in Japanese culture is the very luckiest number, right? So
It's not 4, and 4 is very unlucky, so we knew we weren't going with that date. So
great. And April 4th would have been too far down the road. All right, so 9/9, the Kickstarter is going live, and I know there had been, I think, Indy, you had posted a while back sort of a rough breakout of pricing and tiers. Is that mainly going to maintain from what you'd posted before? Some little changes?
That's very likely to stay exactly as it is. we're doing our best in order to get the best pricing possible for these, but we really, really don't want to sacrifice quality at all. You know, like I mean, I'm not just speaking for myself. I know that both Scott and Rene are, all of us, we're giant toy nerds. We're buying stuff like the SH Figure Arts and Figma and Acid Rain and, smaller runs and higher end toy lines. It's like the pricing comes with it. So, like that's, it would be awesome to get it where Hasbro and Mattel mass market is.
Right.
We're selling only on Kickstarter right now, so we're not making that many.
And I, that's something I wanted to point out, because there have recently, with the advent of 3D printing and, other sort of technology and the collector market becoming this really broad thing, there's been a lot of other action, well, not a lot, but there's been, other action figure Kickstarters. But there's something that's unique about this, I think, is that it is essentially, I mean, you guys are pros, but this is essentially a fan project, which makes it really different than anything else. I mean, even the Four Horsemen, when they've got their Mythic Legions and stuff, they're a company. They have to pay the electric bill on their studio. They've got staff. They need to build in, a certain amount of profit, even though they're a smaller organization and it's not mass retail. But this is really, if I'm understanding things right, you guys are just basically trying to cover your costs and not lose your shirt, right? I mean, essentially.
That is the idea.
Yep.
At the end of the day, we want to put out awesome toys.
Right. So,
like, we want to make ninjas that have not been available in 6-inch scale. So
right. And so the point, like, I know that it's looking like the minimum buy-in is going to be something like 30, 35 for sort of like the basic ninja, and then depending on tiers, there's bulk discounts and stuff. But some people were saying, well, couldn't you make simpler product and get the price down? But the point for you guys is not to. You guys are not approaching this from saying, like, how are we going to be able to sell this, or how are we going to make it accessible at this price point. You basically have in mind what you want to make, and then you're just pricing it based on what it has to be to make that, right?
Right.
Yeah, well, and I think part of what you brought up earlier was that, that there is a certain model that we're wanting to follow as far as articulation and quality, things like that. Quality was always going to be number one with this, and I don't think there's anybody that's going to disagree with me on that, because here's the thing: we've been, hosts to an action figure website for over a decade now, where some people with very discriminating tastes about what they feel makes a good action figure congregate on this website on a daily basis and talk about what makes something good and what makes something not at all good. So just following the footprint of what people talk about in our own space, this is the exact model that we're following, doing that. So anything that would come and sacrifice quality or articulation or the ability for these to blend in with other current, front-running, super articulated action figure lines was just something that never entered the conversation, because we knew that wasn't the direction that this was going to be going in. And I know that some people have, suggested that, oh, well, why don't you, just make another one that you can start at a lower price point. But the thing with that is that this line is being built off of, like a lot of lines, a base body, which the basic ninja represents. So anything else, even if we added 100 points of articulation to it or took out 25 points of articulation to it, those are different, unique pieces that would have to be created individually, right, which would not offset the cost of anything as far as being able to bring down the price, right, of what we're offering.
Right.
Well, yeah, ultimately it's just about compromising. Mm-hmm. And you want as little compromise as possible. If we get to control this from soup to nuts, you don't want to compromise at all if you don't have to.
Right, because you're selling it directly. It's a project. This is what you guys want to make. If you were a company like Hasbro or even the Four Horsemen, you would have different considerations. You'd have to say, look, we've got to keep this to a $20 price point, or you would start with certain limitations, where you guys On the unique thing about this is you're starting with exactly what you want to make, and then you're just pricing it based on that. So
right, and this is the thing to keep in mind is that right now this is going to be being sold on Kickstarter. So if the line were to take off and just be amazing, and then Target, Toys R Us, Walmart, Walgreens want to buy in on the line, of course we would then be making the quantity that could then justify a price break. Right now, we have to account for the tooling costs for an action figure, which are really, really high, and we have a lot of stuff that we want to make in this initial wave of the Feudal series. So it's like the tooling costs are a giant hurdle that we're hoping Kickstarter can overcome. And then, Kickstarter takes a cut. So that's also something that, we're afraid of. Like, no matter what, they are taking money out of it too. So it's not like people are forking over $35 for a ninja, and then Team Fwoosh and Articulated Icons just takes that $35 and puts it in our pocket and heads to Brazil or something. We have to use that to pay to make these toys. We already, the Fwoosh has paid to make the prototypes. That's just the initial cost. There's a lot more cost associated with actually getting a fully produced, highly articulated action figure.
Rene, let me ask you about the sculpt. Was this from start to finish? Did you work digitally, or did you ever do? Or I guess
it was digital 100%.
And do you work strictly digital pretty much these days in your other projects and stuff as well?
Yeah, it turns out I wasn't good traditionally, so digital's the way to go. Yeah.
Much more forgiving, I guess, or easier to change, and
it's just different.
Yeah.
Well, let's think about it this way. We got feedback on that original Ninja torso, right? And people thought that the neckline went too far. There is no possible way that Rene or anyone else could have turned that around as quickly as he did to make that change that you're seeing now in the final product, right? So I think it makes sense from a lot of different angles.
And what was in your spare time, Rene, over the several years that you worked on this in your spare time? What were was the understanding always that you were creating a basic ninja that was going to be something that would have swappable parts and be
I think the swappable parts, swappable hands and heads were always a thing. The belt too. I think once we got close to the end, we started adding some other things.
We started adding all sorts of things because we got excited.
I could just sort of hear Pablo Lobo, seeing stuff and saying, "Hey, can't you make a giant wizard samurai with?"
We don't let Pablo Lobo.
We don't listen to. Yeah, he doesn't talk about it.
He's not loud.
We just say that's a very good idea. And pat him on the head, point in the other direction.
What were some of the as the project went on, and even just from the start, what were some of the bigger challenges of sculpting something where you have to keep in mind that things are going to be interchangeable or have different paint masters on the same sculpt or things like that? What are some things?
The paint master thing isn't a problem. The paint's just the paint. That's Scott's problem. The biggest problem I had, and it's something that I didn't consider going into it, was certain wrinkles have to line up on certain things. Like if there's a wrinkle on the back of the knee, that has to line up on the shin. And if there's more than one shin, then it has to line up on that one too. And that's just a weird thing to consider.
Sure.
Yeah.
And in terms of the swappable stuff, you said the heads and hands was really an idea from the beginning, and then you guys sort of grew out of that. Indy, how did you guys just start with a simple idea and then just got bolder and bolder, or were you sort of inspired by some of the lines that were coming out over the last couple of years, or how did that idea sort of grow?
Well, like I said, we've been doing this for a while, and Hasbro, we're doing the Marvel Legends line. Mattel, we do WWE. So we're kind of really, really ingrained in this whole reuse of parts and mixing and matching. And then, you have Rene, Scott, and myself that are also customizers. So it's like we're nerds, we're fanboys. It's like we love mixing and matching and taking stuff apart and putting it together in different iterations. So, as we saw that first Ninja Digital sculpt that Rene created, like the three of us would go, we'd have lunches all the time, or probably talk about it endlessly, on chat or in person, what have you. And we just kept adding in different parts to create different characters, which I know we've hinted on the boards and in our press release about a lot of our stretch goals, but we have a lot more unique parts that have not been seen yet to create entirely new characters. So it's a lot of really cool stuff that I know we're all super excited to show off on September 9th.
Here's how bad this is. Yesterday I got a text from Adam saying, hey, if we take pictures with this part and that part, then we can get this other character that looks like whatever. So it's still going.
And Scott, what about so sort of same question I put to Rene, but how does when you're painting a figure that you've got things that are going to be swapping and interchangeable, how does that play into the paint master and how you approach that?
The only difficulty comes from having to try and predict 8 or 9 months in advance what people are going to prefer or what their intent is for swapping. So if you know that there's somebody out there who's interested in a certain figure or a certain look to their figure, you want to do the best job you can trying to predict what parts they're going to want to use on what body, or what arms they're going to want to use on what torso, or and making the choice to try and make those colors match, so that you're minimizing, at least from my point of view, you're minimizing as much of the customizing that people have to do.
Right.
Because you want to give them as much as you can for their money, But that's pretty much it. Is just trying to predict or at least appreciate what people are going to want.
And
style-wise, and making that color match for them as best as we possibly can.
So he's bringing it down to people at my level of customizing that don't get much beyond the
so
boiler
for example,
I don't want to repaint. So
for example, if you're going to make a set of bear arms that come in one of the stretch goal tiers that comes in a set, and that those bear arms have wraps at the wrist. Now, those bear arms could go on a red ninja, black ninja, white ninja. You've kind of got to guess,
it's not so much that, because that's baked in. We already knew that we were going to try and do, accent things like that for...
The flesh tone is standard across the entire line. So, like, all of our stretch goals that are entirely new characters all have the same flesh tone across the board. So it'll work with everything that we make.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's taking into consideration that there's some color choices and color themes that are available on some of the later stretch goal figures, where if you really wanted to, you could buy the whole thing and then swap parts around amongst everything, and you could probably still get some pretty cohesive, cool looking thematic color themes at least.
Cool.
Because I think we have a total of 11 characters, something like that, close to that, and then from that, with the part swapping alone, people can then take this and make way, way, way more.
Sort of boggles the mind.
The great thing about having the AI design team being 3 guys is that we get to all kind of vote on everything. Well, I guess the great thing / the terrible thing,
the horrible thing.
I know that
To
Scott
outvote
wanted to
someone.
take his own life a few times, especially when I think all 3 of us ended up deciding kind of early on. You guys didn't see it because we didn't post any pictures, but we weren't really happy with the red on the red ninja on the first pass, and it was just, Scott was like, "Oh my god, I have to repaint the whole figure all over again and do like, basically start from the ground up." But all three of us were just, not willing to compromise on that, and he did it, and it looks kind of awesome now. The red that it is I think it's perfect.
Yeah, it certainly looks great in the pictures. And in terms of that not compromising, again, that theme we keep coming back to, but even on the paints, there's a lot going on. I mean, we're talking about, for the most part, what we've seen so far anyway, is the basic Ninja or the deluxe Ninja, where, they're essentially, quote-unquote, all one color, sort of monochromatic, but there's a lot more going on there. There's a lot of shading and
chime in there, because every single one of those is at least one color with a wash or dry. I mean, Scott can say it.
Yeah. Pretty much everybody has at least, if you're talking about like this is just the Black Ninja. The Black Ninja is actually 3 colors. We're kind of cheating because we know that we can potentially get away with one color being injection molded at the factory level. So the hope is that essentially it's going to cost out for the figure to be injected in black plastic for at least those body parts, and then getting away with a 2-hit paint app on the figure, trying to do as much as we can at the factory level to get people So you don't want something that is just a one color hit. We're trying to make something that is at least that collector level, because we know people are paying, at least what I think, it's a lot for a figure. But again, we're trying to at least give everybody their doll hair amount.
Their doll
hair
amount.
That? No, and
doll hairs.
And also that a lot of that could be potentially due to my photography that everyone on here makes fun of. I'm without backgrounds, high contrast, but like that's my design outlook on lots of things. So that's my photos. I just want all the listeners to know, and we're gonna spread this around as well. But we packed up all 11 paint masters on Friday, shipped them to Matthew K. So Matthew K will be doing full photo shoots on all of our figures. I'm pretty sure that if you're listening to this, you're familiar with who Matthew K is, but he is awesome when it comes to photo features on the Fwoosh, and you can see his stuff on any of the Masters of the Universe Classics features. So, I mean, his photos, beautiful. I can't wait to see what he does with these.
Yeah, I'm so excited for that, because he built new sets for these and everything. So the official product photography is just going to be something that I think even real companies are going to have a hard time competing with us.
Yeah.
with.
Well, I mean, look, that's something that a lot of companies. I mean, this has been talked about on the boards a lot, but for whatever reason, I don't know if some of it gets outsourced or it's just the last thing people think about, but a lot of companies, the photos of their official product photos are not always the best.
Well, I think that's one of the things that we can mark as being a difference between the way that our business is going to have to run and the way that major manufacturers like Mattel and Hasbro run, is that let's remember, at the end of the day, those guys sell their figures to stores. We're selling our figures directly to, the end consumer. So that's the type of thing that I know a lot of people hold as being very important. So I think Matt K's magic is going to really help out with that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. And this is another thing. I can only assume that along with sets that he may have built and lighting setups, that he's going to have some we've got an unhappy customer. She says the vest was better when it was lower. No.
Like this conversation.
She's like, more Marvel talk. No, I was just going to say with Matthew's photos, I'm assuming there's going to be some sort of non-player characters in there. Maybe figures from other lines he might include just for the sake of
that's all up to
comparison.
Matt. He's going to rock it in what he does,
Yeah, I think one of the big things that is going to be furthered also by his photography is that we do have this line is being done with kind of its own story and its own characters, which people will learn a lot more about once the Kickstarter launches. So it is in a way self-contained, but to your point of Matt maybe introducing other figures from established lines and things like that to photograph with these guys, is that the other part is that we want this to be able to fit in with other lines that are out there. So
and that's going back to the choice of ninjas, because I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that you guys could have done for a figure line like this, sort of a non-licensed, broad, interchangeable line. And I'd love to hear about some of the stuff you guys might have tossed around, but ninjas certainly fits in with just about every other line.
You're right, and I think, and the other guys can speak to this too. I think there were a lot of options that were tossed around and whatnot, but I think right from the very beginning it was, if we're going to do something, you got to do ninjas first, and it never really changed from that. Even though you're right, there are a ton of other possibilities that could be future endeavors and things like that.
Yeah,
Cool.
Rene and I were talking about doing ninjas as far back as 2007. So
Scott and I have never talked.
There were some pretty weird days back there at Soda Toys in the sort of post Jerry era, and one of the ideas we were talking about is getting around the whole idea of having to pay that extra 15 or 20% licensing and just make cool figures for what they are. And one of those ideas was like, why don't we just make a ninja and see how it goes. And the real reason for that is just it's something that we would have been able to do. And then ninjas are pretty safe. Ninjas are pretty ubiquitous. They're pretty they can pretty easily slide into any kind of collector line that you're interested in. These are gonna look great with Star Wars figures. They're gonna look great with Masters figures. They're gonna look especially good with Hasbro's Marvel Legends, because that's what Rene does, really. So.
Right, and certainly DC stuff, and even your old Soda and NECA stuff. I know people have been talking a lot about G.I. Joe, even though there isn't a 6-inch line for G.I. Joe, but certainly some of these characters could sell.
Well, but there's still, we have an understanding of what the people who are going to be interested in ninjas, what kind of aesthetics and what kind of design.
And I think Adam kind of touched on this on the forum briefly, and I don't think it was maybe picked up as much as it probably should have been, is that where a lot of these design influences come from, there's a lot of stuff in there that's based on historical accuracy. So if you're wanting to build out a historical looking line, there are definitely elements that are in there, and a lot of them you actually haven't seen yet. But then there's also some more like pop cultural or common cultural norms that people think about when they picture characters like these, that kind of help them integrate into more modern properties a little bit better as well.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah,
there was a little bit of talk. Yeah, there was a little bit of talk about that on the boards. Obviously, where the Fwoosh is an action figure collector's board, so there is some real deep knowledge about certain geek stuff, and we certainly have some valued members out there that have a rich historical encyclopedic knowledge of ancient Japan and feudal Japan. But as you say, these aren't necessarily striving for specific historic accuracy, but more like what one thinks of when one thinks of a ninja.
Well, ultimately,
timeless.
It's what's going to make a better action figure. What's going to make
There you go. And speaking of what makes better action figures, another thing that we have not discussed about these is the number and sort of the number of accessories, which is, I mean, I've lost count of all the different weapons and things that are come with this, and the stretch goals and stuff. But we've just been joined by Stephen Gomez, who is another AI design member. And Stephen, I understand you are the man behind the accessories. You there, Stephen? No. we don't have him.
That's funny.
Well, maybe we'll add him in. Let's see. He's on. He's just not on.
He's
the
in.
call.
He just his mic probably isn't working.
All right. Let's see if we can. I'm going to have our producer see if we can fix that. But let's talk.
Yeah, I think actually, real quick before Steve is able to afford a real microphone, there's, I think, all told, if we get to actually tool up everything we're intending to tool, with all the articulation and all the parts breakdown and all the accessories, I think this figure comes in between 160 and 170 parts. So
whoa.
there's it's a pretty tall order. It's a pretty. I mean, that
feels
picture
like
of us
there
on
should be
Instagram.
more.
Yeah, no, it's. I counted. I mean,
Jesus.
depending on how China's actually going to fuse any of the parts or anything like that, how they're going to join some of the I guess the parts. I don't really want to tease what they are, but it's I think initially it was 162 that we initially got molded for Paint Masters from essentially the one tool thing, because for all 11 versions of this figure you can make all these different copies, so it's not like one figure is 170 parts, but for the entire tooling run of what we're going to be able to do, it's crazy, it's ridiculous.
And let's remember too that includes like joint pieces and things like that.
Sure.
Yeah,
So
we're counting. I mean, it's basically anything that's in an individual part that would have to be molded as its own separate thing. I mean, it's crazy.
That is crazy. Steven, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got
There
you.
it goes.
Hi ho!
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. So we were just, I don't know if you could, I guess you probably couldn't hear us. Well, you weren't on the call. You were on the chat, but not the call. But we're just started talking about the accessories and weapons and such for the Articulated Icons line, of which I understand you are the point person there.
Yeah. I did the accessories. The,
Cool. And
pins
so now they, Indy and Scott and Rene are talking about how they've been talking about.
Indy
kicking
is
around.
back, by the way. I just had to go change a shitty diaper. So
Oh, just a shitty diaper. Would you? If I go all in, will my deluxe ninja come with a shitty diaper?
Well, now.
And how many paint masters of poo?
That's a $10,000 backer level. That there, it'll be available to one person.
The poo will be injected, molded in brown, but there'll be two other brown shades painted on it. All right. No, Steven, they were talking. These guys have been talking about how they've been discussing a ninja line for years, and this line in particular for some time. When did you enter into that world, and when did you start working on accessories and weapons and stuff and such?
I think I was pretty much at it pretty later in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I got the request, and he asked me if it was something I could do, and I said yeah. And I think he was pretty well into making the ninja before I started making the weapons. We just kind of got a list of weapons for me to do, and asked me if there was any other ideas I had for weapons, and we just kind of tossed it around through emails and just pretty much went from there.
It's cool. I mean, definitely.
Some of the more obscure weapons were Steve's idea too.
Sex bat.
So
sex bat.
sex bat.
And just so you guys know, Steve is actually an ex-Soda employee as well, so he worked with all of us there, and then decided to no longer be in toys because he's too good for toys.
Oh, Steven, can you tell us what you do now?
You know what? Toys is too good for Steve. How about that? He didn't leave us, we left him.
I've always been more into drawing and illustration, so I wanted to pursue a career in conceptual art.
Cool.
That's kind of pretty much where I focus most of the time, but I've always loved toys.
Well, certainly, I would say in most of the reveals and teaser pics that we've had, coming out over the last few weeks, the accessories has been one of the big things people have responded to. Both the sheer number of them, but also the detail and the care that's been taken with them.
That's awesome.
There's some cool stuff, and when you guys were talking about obscure ones, certainly there's like weapons in there I've never seen or heard of, but it's like, wow, that is something else. What was some of the bigger challenges in designing some of that stuff? For someone who may not be familiar with design processes and stuff, you're having to work with things like weight, right? Like if you're thinking about can a character hold this, all that kind of stuff. What goes into fabricating accessories like that?
Yeah, well, it's very different from like say creating an actual sword in terms of like what you would do for like a video game or anything else, a special effect, because you have to take into consideration that it's gonna be scaled down a lot. So you don't want to put too much detail that might get distorted once it's shrunken down. So I went back and forth with Rene a lot with from when I started. I think I started with the katana sword, and I would just send a lot of stuff out to Rene, and he would be like, no, you gotta take out this and that, that's not gonna work. So there was a lot of that, but once
wasn't that nice about it.
when you're digitally sculpting, like one of the things that we always say to any digital sculptor is to like remember to zoom out. So it's like if you're sculpting something, you're gonna be doing it on your screen and you're gonna be like zoomed in like crazy and like doing all this awesome detail work. But if you zoom out until it's on the screen at the same size as what the final product is gonna be, it kind of gives you a real good idea of, oh man, that katana is going to be paper thin, and we don't want that. Or all of that etching work that I'm doing on the handle, there's no way it's going to come out. So a lot of the times when you're zoomed in, it almost looks like a Fisher Price toy or something, because you have to keep everything up and really like go deep on details and basically make it look a little bit more ridiculous when you're looking at it up close, because that thing's only going to be 4 inches long when it's a final product.
Right. I imagine that is an issue for painting as well, right? You make something that is going to be impossible to be painted because it's too small or detailed or something.
No, nothing's really impossible to paint.
Nothing's possible for Scott.
No, it's the thing with the difficulty when it comes to that kind of stuff is you want as much detail as possible to try and recreate, just because from translating the sculpt to paint, texture is the name of the game. And with a lot of the weapons and stuff like that, you want as much detail packed into it to make it a lot easier for you to either do washes or any kind of guided change in color. It's just going to make it a lot easier on me, and then at the factory level too.
Right. Speaking of, go ahead.
I think that the hard part for paint is all summed up by Scott's motto during this to me and Rene, which is stop making changes.
Yeah, that was pretty much me, what I said.
Well, you touched on painting at the factory level. I'd love to ask about I have a vague idea of how this all works in terms of once you've got everything done and you hand it off to the factory to actually produce. It seems like in terms of sculpts and stuff, it's pretty straightforward. They cut a mold, right, and they're pressing out hopefully what you guys have designed. But how does that work in terms of paint? Because you're sitting there with a test shot and you're hand painting a master. How does that that's obviously how does that go to the factory? What are they working from when they're mass producing them?
Well, we're gonna give them our paint masters once they're done, and
Scott, direct them on test shot first.
Okay, well, a test shot is actually a counter sample that we're going to get from the factory, usually injected in some leftover plastic color that they have from previous fulfillment. And primarily what I'm working on is
thus far has been just prototypes.
Prototypes, yes.
These are all resin resin castings of prototypes. So even though they look like real toys and they're posed like real toys for a lot of this stuff, they are very delicate.
Right.
But yeah, at the factory level, we're hoping that we're going to get a lot of our POM and PVC elements injected in whatever color they're based out in terms of where I'm working on a color as a base coat. They're going to actually be injecting the plastic in that color. And then from there, it's going to go into, they're doing their different paint apps. So for every paint app I add, the factory is going to be adding a paint hit, and that's an additional cost for us. So we try to minimize that with still getting, as much as we can to make this seem like it's part of a collector line. And then, yeah, the factory's going to have our paint masters in hand, and as well as Pantone colors to match.
Cool.
Do you know about
Yes,
Pantone? Did I explain
great
Pantone? Yeah.
Maybe I do, but maybe for the sake of some of our listeners,
Pantone is a color guide essentially, and
Mm-hmm.
they have a huge range of all these different colors, from coated colors to uncoated colors to textiles. And if you're working in paint and color, it's pretty much standard across the board that factories speak Pantone, we speak Pantone. Basically,
Right.
It's like a color language.
if anybody out there has ever run had a little blog or something where they've chosen colors and there's a hex code for a particular color, that hex code comes
It's kind of
from Pantone.
similar. Yeah, it's basically it's just a guide. It's a way
Mm-hmm.
for the factory to see. And so yeah, they're going to have pretty detailed color sheets on every single character basically. And there's certain things where like basically all the characters share skin tone.
Mm-hmm.
So there's things that they're not necessarily going to have to adapt or change once they get it, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's going to be nuts for them. Hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully those guys know what they're doing when it comes to painting some of the more detailed art.
Well, and then that brings us to something, and this is that for not just small toy lines, but Mattel, Hasbro, the giants, whoever. The sort of thing that's always out there is you can make whatever you make can be fantastic, what have you. Once you hand off to the factory, you're really at the mercy of what comes out. So how do you maintain that sort of oversight?
That's going to be like our biggest hurdle with the whole line. But the thing that we have going for us that Mattel and Hasbro doesn't is that we're willing to compromise our time. So usually Hasbro and Mattel, they have to hit a certain shelf date, or they have to get
Yeah,
product.
they have to have it in a quarter, otherwise somebody's getting fired.
We don't. But we'll have lots of disappointed Kickstarter backers if we push everything a month. But I mean, you've seen it with Boss Fight and with the Four Horsemen. They've pushed so that way they can make sure the product is of the quality that they want, and we'll do the same thing.
Cool. So yeah, that really is. That's sort of relates to what we were talking about at the top in terms of the sort of uniqueness, where you guys aren't a business per se, and you do have the flexibility for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's one of those things I've said it a lot of time going through this and doing prototypes and stuff like that. You always end up with the same thing where it's like, congratulations, you made another awesome prototype. I've been personally, and everybody who's involved in this we've all been there with products before where you slave away and you make something that you think is really, really cool, and it comes along 9 months later, a year later, and you're just like, what the hell happened? So, we're still at the beginning. I mean, everybody needs to understand that, these prototypes are awesome. These are really good figures so far, but the hard part is only, it's only getting 1,000 of these things made, it's only getting these to be that great at that level from China, That's the hard.
And we should reiterate that this is a Kickstarter, so it has to fund. So all you listeners out there, certainly don't take anything for granted. The Kickstarter is going to
Yeah.
launch. It's going to
Technically,
launch.
these are awesome customs right now.
Yeah, right.
Basically.
Matt Kay's going to take some great pictures, so they'll be immortalized forever. But if we want to actually have these figures produced, you'll have to join the Kickstarter, which is going to start September 9th. Obviously, there's going to be plenty of information to be found on the Fwoosh.com. There's an entire articulated icons section. If you go to the front page on the header bar, of course, there's a thread in the general toy section. There's the Instagram. You find articulated icons on Instagram. There's a lot of great pictures and teasers and stuff on there. It's got the project has to fund, and it's no small task. So
It's going to be a very stressful 5 weeks or so.
Yeah, and there's going to be tiers and stretch goals, and obviously not everybody has to do an all-in $1,000 thing. I know I won't be able to do that. I'm in for maybe a 3-pack and a deluxe figure or something. But there's going to be multi-packs where people, I'm sure, will be going in together to get a 12-pack of basic ninjas or what have you. But the point is, please get on board, because nothing is a foregone conclusion until that thing funds.
Yeah.
You guys,
we are all terrified.
well, you certainly should all be very proud of the work that you've done so far, whatever happens, because this is really fantastic stuff. Before we go, I just want to go around and ask each of you guys what aspect of articulated icons, whether it be a particular character, accessory, or some function of the line, what particular thing are you most excited about? Scott, Carl, let's start with you.
Yeah. I think if I'm going to say the thing that I'm the most excited about, it's just the whole idea behind it. What's possible to be done for the future if this thing is successful. The idea that we're just a bunch of collectors and toy fans who are fortunate enough to be able to work professionally. The things that we're actually capable of making are pretty awesome, and if the funding is there and the support is there, there's really not a lot of limits on what we would want to be able to do and what we want to put into other collectors' hands. I mean, that's really the thing that I think is most exciting is what this could mean for the future.
Very, very much so. Agreed. Rene, how about you?
I just want this thing to get funded, because if this thing get, I would have essentially wasted 2 years of my life working on this thing. So
Give me my time back.
Steven, how about you?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much the same boat as Scott. When if this thing gets funded and just the potential things we could do and how we can carry this on, I'm just really excited to see where this could go, and just see a lot of more original ideas. I think with all the other toy companies, what the other Kickstarters, the Boss Fight Studios and whatnot, what they're doing, I think it's really cool, and I'm just excited to see this expand into new.
Yeah, we're really happy to be a part of that kind of thing. The idea that we're professionals, but we're also fans, and how cool it could be for us to just be, making exactly what we want, and for the people who have likewise opinions, it's going to be really cool, especially if we take it as far as we want to, because we do have ideas for the future. So
that sounds very tantalizing. Yeah, it does seem like the new frontier in terms of between crowdsourcing and 3D printing and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it just feels like we're just at the beginning of so many possibilities.
Well, and it's the new frontier, but it's kind of going back to the old frontier as well, because it's not commonplace anymore to have an opportunity to get in with an action figure line that is an original idea that's not based off of something else. Sure, there are historical and pop cultural aspects and references that go into this line, but this isn't something that has a giant movie coming out either. So it's kind of fun to go back to back in the 1980s when toy lines would be toy lines based off an original concept, and they would throw them out there to see if they stuck. That's kind of a cool feeling to kind of be a part of that movement as well.
Definitely.
Maybe
Indy?
we can have an 80s style cartoon of our ninjas too.
or maybe a comic book. Indy, what's your big takeaway? What are you most excited about?
Silence.
Oh,
Sounds
you may
like
be changing
he's
up.
on diaper duty.
First time.
figures.
I'm the most excited about scheduling. I'm the most excited about scheduling future podcasts when my kid's mom is home, so that way she can watch it.
Well, all right, you guys. We've reached the end of our time, but I really want to thank you guys again very much for coming on and talking to us. It's really, really great having you. I cannot wait for the Kickstarter to start. I cannot wait to get these toys
there's
in
going
my
to be
hands.
a lot more information coming soon. So keep your eyes on the Fwoosh, the Instagram account, and also a lot of other sites are also coming to help us out with spreading the word for this. September 9th, which is 9/9, is going to be the big day when we're going to launch. So
9/9, everybody.
I wanted to say a real quick thanks to all the guys that actually threw up the press release and stuff like that. It's really cool.
For sure.
For
sure.
It's really sweet. So
Yeah, definitely. Thanks again for coming in. The FwooshCast will be off for the next 2 weeks, but then Nick and I will be back with another fresh episode after
it'll
that.
be the most stressful FwooshCast ever. We'll be right in the middle of the Kickstarter.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so for Nick and the entire design staff of Articulated Icons, I am Tony. On the boards, Hagope. Thank you for listening. Keep your ears and eyes peeled for more Articulated Icons. Again, 9/9 is the Kickstarter launch. Be sure to get on board. We got to make these happen. Thanks again, and play nice.